Good day, and thank you so much for having us here on NTN. My name is McNaughton McLean. I am the Communications Manager at the National Insurance Corporation. With me today is the Director of the National Insurance Corporation, Mr. Matthew Matherin, and also the Head of Group Internal Audit, Mrs. Swan Shallery Payne. Today we'll provide some more information on the Economic Relief Program, which was recently announced here in St. Lucia to provide some income support to the people affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll start off by asking the Director to give us some remarks on the program. Mr. Matherin.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Good day, listeners and viewers. The raison d'etre of the National Insurance Corporation is the provision of the social security net, that social safety net. Persons pay monies into this fund monthly. It's a percentage of the salary, 5%. And for that, they become entitled to payments from the National Insurance Corporation on the occurrence of certain events. So in the short term, if you're sick and out of work, you become entitled to a sickness benefit from the National Insurance Corporation for a maximum period of 26 weeks. If you're out on maternity, you become entitled to a lump sum payment and a series of payments over 3 months on maternity allowance. In the longer term, if you're out of work because you're retired or you've attained the age of 65, then you become entitled to a pension for the rest of your life. If prior to that, you become an invalid, something happens and you can no longer work, you become entitled to an invalidity benefit for the rest of your life. And should you die prior to coming in receipt of a pension, then your survivor, your spouse, if he or she is over the age of 55, that person becomes entitled to a survivor's pension for life. If you have a child who is 16, under the age of 16, then that child gets the survivor's pension up to the age of 16. And if you have a child who is 18 years old and in full-time education, then that child gets a survivor's pension up to the age of 18. And if the child is an invalid, the child gets the survivor's pension for the rest of his or her life. As you can see, protecting against loss of income falls within the mandate of the National Insurance Corporation. And given the potential severity of this pandemic on our contributors, NIC was moved, in effect, bound to act. And we were not alone. In a report from the World Bank titled Social Protection and Jobs Responses to COVID-19, a real-time review of country measures. And I quote, as of March 20th, 2020, a total of 45 countries have introduced, adapted, or expanded social protection programs in response to COVID-19. Responses are present in all regions. The most widely used measures include cash transfers, 30 programs, followed by wage subsidies, 11, subsidized sick leave, 10, and various forms of subsidies and social security contributions and unemployment insurance. NIC's proposed program is along the lines of an unemployment payment. And to give you an idea of the program, the NIC proposes to pay 50% of your salary, subject to a minimum payment of $500 and a maximum payment of $1,500. Of course, this will be reduced by any stipend you receive or any financial assistance you receive during the period you're claiming for. To qualify, you would have to have been in employment as of February. You had to have been unemployed or not at work and not in receipt of a salary as a result of COVID. And you had to have paid one contribution payment. Now, to get to this stage, we have to have conceptualized the program. When we recognize the scale of the program, we had to undertake various courses to determine whether we could afford the program. And that's required constant communication with our actuary to determine what was the maximum payment the NIC could make without compromising the fund. Armed with these figures, we were able to formulate a program. However, we needed to have the authority within the legislation to have this program in place. And therefore, that required constant interaction between our legal department and the Attorney General's office. And it was not an easy process. It was a process which required a lot of hours. And I have to thank our legal counsel who had to be up all night and on weekends and to make sure we had this thing out as quickly as possible, because we could not roll out the program before the law was enacted. It also meant that given the anticipated significant number of persons we expected who would be applying for that benefit from the National Insurance Corporation, that our systems would have to be able to accommodate it. And we knew that given those numbers, it was not something that the manual system would be able to do. So therefore, we have to digitize the process. Now, given the scale, and you've seen what has happened internationally, that even some of the best prepared countries in the world, you see the best plans fail, as soon as you get into battle. And we have seen all around the world that systems are crashing as a result of the significant demand being made on the IT infrastructure. So therefore, even prior to this, we were already in discussions with service providers to see how we could increase our capacity to ensure that we will be able to accommodate any influx of applications. And we had our team working, even in a condition where most of the world was shut down. We had our team working and being able to source that facility and being able to update our IT infrastructure to take it. So as you could see, now the law has been enacted. Now the IT infrastructure is up and running. And now we've been able to accommodate the influx of applications that are here. So I will stop here and see what else you have to show my way, Mr.
Well, of course, we had a lot of inquiries regarding the program. People were concerned that it took so long after the announcement. I'm happy that you were able to clarify a lot of these areas. And people were even concerned that we had put out forms. And I can readily, add to that we did put out a few forms, hoping that, knowing full well that there would be a few people who perhaps wouldn't have access to computers or devices to complete the process online. And we put a few forms there, and we all know the issues with that. So, and that led to the decision, of course, to handle the entire process online.
Yeah, well, the idea was that we would have a system that would be able to accommodate the vast majority of persons. Of course, we recognize there'll be exceptions. So the idea of the forms was that we'd be able to use those forms for a few of the persons who would not be able to do the online and apply electronically. But as you know, the process went haywire. And in less than no time, we had thousands of those forms in, which comprised the process. But it was always our intention to go electronic, because that's the only way you could handle this thing efficiently. I mean, I could tell you that we did not announce that we had the form online. And within the first couple of hours, by 10 o'clock, we had 5,000 applications in.
Yeah.
So think of you having to handle this manually. The manpower requirement, given the conditions we were under currently, because now social distancing and COVID is still around, right? So you want to make sure that you minimize interaction between your staff and the public. So it's in the interest of the staff, it's in the interest of the public. But also it's in the interest of efficiency also, because you cannot efficiently process the vast number of applications we're expecting. And I do not know if I'll preempt one of your questions, but we anticipate that we could have anywhere between 15,000 persons and 30,000 persons applying out of a registered active database of 50-something thousand people. So you're looking at up to 60% of persons we have made provision for as a worst case scenario in the situation.
Well, my last check, we had over 10,000 already. So I think the best case scenario, you're looking at maybe 30,000, because when I last checked, we were over 10,000 applications already on that database. So it's quite a few. So the key question again among some of the contributors, how soon will they be paid? Because they've put in the application, they've waited for a month since the announcement, and they have put in the application. How soon after the application process can they reasonably expect payment?
Well, let me first say that we got to the stage of the application process because we couldn't do anything before the legislation was enacted.
Right.
And we have legal advice to the fact that we couldn't even go out and roll out the program. But at least it gave us time to put things in place. The applications coming in will require some processing, and we are looking to make payments within the week. So applications only started coming in this week. There'll be a little niggles here and there, but so far so good. Everything seems to have been rolling out pretty well. So the first payment will be, we're looking to have the first payment in the upcoming week. Thereafter, now that the process is online and functioning properly, subsequent payments will be a lot sooner. So we're looking to make May's payments at the end of May. Okay. And hopefully things will ease up by then, but if June comes, then before the end of June. So that way, as long as the first payment, the first step is always the more difficult one. After that first step, after that first payment, I think everything's going to flow beautifully.
People also wanted to know whether or not they will be required to apply again every month, or it is just automatic once you do the application once. You will be entitled to the payment for the 3 months.
No, you only have to apply once the application form it's requested certain information, which allows us to determine the time your unemployment is supposed to end, if it's going to be ending, because some companies will have laid off persons for a certain period of time. We'll also be doing our checks, and we have our very able provincial auditor here. We'll ensure that those persons do not stay on the system even after they have returned to work. So the whole idea is that we pay people while they are out of work. The moment they go back, you have a moral obligation to notify, because that's one of the conditions, I think, on form, that you're supposed to notify the institution when you're back at work. And so we depend on the system that way, and we trust our solution people will honor that and notify us to avoid us having to do too much audit work to find out who's in the system.
Even with all of this system, we must have checks and balances. And Mrs. Payne, I know you've been working really hard. You've been burning the midnight oil as well, trying to ensure that the system is up and running, and the necessary checks and balances are in place to ensure there's no abuse. Perhaps you can walk us through some of the key features to avoid such occurrences.
All right, the safeguards that are embedded in the program were basically guided by a few broad objectives. Firstly, definitely that it is executed in accordance with the enacted legislation. All right. Secondly, to ensure that it is not abused in the sense that fraudulent claims come in for processing. We have to be mindful of that. Thirdly, that, and I think most importantly for the purposes of the NIC, is that it is rolled out as efficiently as possible, that the controls are put in place to reduce manual intervention, but ensure that the checks and balances can be flagged automatically without reliance on too much human intervention. And of course, doing all of that while maintaining the protocols that have been established for social distancing and so on. So these are the safeguards. That's what guided the safeguards that were in place. The director spoke about the implementation of an e-form, an electronic form. That is where the controls really started. And like he indicated, there was always an intention to execute this electronically. As persons would imagine, the volume that he spoke of, to have to process those manually would be too inundating for the organization. The program was so designed that the electronic forms that were developed and allowed to be completed and submitted electronically would feed directly into our program. So another aspect that really took time to develop with the intention that it would save us time down the line is the development of a program with embedded controls that would receive those applications electronically, flag any abnormalities using the database within NIC in order to identify persons who qualify and pay. Another aspect of that link was the electronic payment, where persons get paid directly to their bank accounts using that program again. So that program that was developed had to be tested to ensure that it is working accurately. And as you'd imagine, it's a new program. The Economic Relief Program is a new program to the NIC. That program had to be developed from scratch and tested to ensure that it is rolled out accurately. So these are some of the controls that they put in place. Another control that is relied upon as well is the feedback from the employers. And that we have also made electronic to receive feedback from them. So employers would be guided with information that is required to be submitted by them to facilitate the application process.
That would facilitate some sort of cross-check of the information.
Right. Whatever information that doesn't currently reside on the NIC database, that system will facilitate that.
Now, I know the director spoke about the intention to provide forms for people who didn't have access. Now, that has been taken away for obvious reasons. People were copying and selling forms, which was never the intention. And so that is taken away. So what provisions are currently in place for people who may not have access?
Right. Arrangements have been made with the ICT centers around the island by appointment to facilitate those persons without access to device or internet to facilitate that process. So those persons are expected to call into NIC to advise that they need access to that, and the necessary arrangements would be made.
All right, so they can't just simply walk in, they have to call, we make the appointment. I guess in keeping with the partial scale down of operations and social distancing,
that's right.
We just can't send a throng of people to descend on the ICT centers.
That's right. So it will be carefully managed at the National Insurance Corporation. Persons call in, indicate, and the center nearest to those individuals will be allocated a designated time to go in to get those forms completed. You mentioned the forms as well. Persons need to recognize that the use of the paper form, basically the hard copy form, would also result in a longer process. Because first of all, you don't know how accurately that you're filling it out. The electronic form has controls again embedded within it to guide the applicant to enter the correct information. We tried to do everything up front to safeguard delays down the line in terms of querying and delaying payments to persons. Yeah. So the use of that electronic form, definitely feeding right through was a key aspect.
Additionally, when you have people writing and somebody have to interpret that handwriting and to enter that data, that's where you can capture the wrong information.
Exactly.
So this is another safeguard in itself.
Right.
To ensure that we get the accurate information.
That's correct.
I don't know either you or the director want to take this one. A number of people who applied for the program are indicating that they have made some errors in and how do they correct this. Perhaps made some errors in submitting the account information.
I'll let Mrs. Spinner handle that because that one of the reasons is because of one of the control measures we put in place for that. So Mrs. Spinner could probably that.
Right. It depends on the nature of the errors that person has put in place. So we anticipate that. For example, a lot of the calls we are getting is persons believe that they may have entered the incorrect NI number. While we did ask that it be reconfirmed, it may not be an error in the accuracy, the number being entered, but maybe a wrong number was just entered twice, both places. One of the requirements was that persons submit a copy of the ID.
So yeah.
Right? To submit a copy of the ID with the application. And again, that is why we went electronic, to safeguard that. If the system would flag if there's an error in the number the person submitted and their name. And then we have that backup that we can go to try to resolve that. So whilst we try to avoid a lot of those by the parameters that were set on the form, we did put in backup measures in place to safeguard against persons probably entering the wrong information. However, an option persons have as well, if they're concerned that they may have made an error on their form, is to send an email to covid19@stlucianic.org, indicating the nature of the error they believe that they've made, but importantly, that they quote the NI number, so it'll be easy to trace to the application. One of the measures to actually fill out that form electronically, you had to set a designated email address set up to which the link was sent. And once that application was submitted, you would not be allowed to go back to that form for obvious reasons in terms of facilitating our processing. If we started processing, we don't want to do that. So we want to maintain control of that. So persons have that option to send any queries, any concerns that they have to that designated email address.
Okay. Mr. Maffrey, the program, since the announcement, I think gathered a lot of interest in NIC. I know some of it, the comments and all may have been negative because people felt they were waiting. But do you think that's an opportunity now that a lot of people are now focusing more on NIC, the program itself, the benefits, and that's an opportunity now for us to start the discussion about unemployment benefits?
I would think that the case for unemployment benefit has already been made. I think people have recognized that it is a necessary product which we should be having. Given that the NIC was currently not set up to provide unemployment benefits, meaning that we currently are not levying contributions to cover it. Everything has a cost. You cannot have an insurance for your house. You pay an insurance for your house. And if your car gets burned down, you cannot claim against that house insurance. That's the same thing too. NIC's contribution rate has been set since 1970. That 10% was there from the time of the National Provident Fund. 5% by the employer, 5% by the employee. And this has not changed, even though the cost of benefits have been increasing. And if we were to draw a graph of the pensions expenditure since inception, you will see the curve almost sloping upwards quite steeply. So it would be important for persons to understand that should we go that route, and I think there's a very strong case for going that route. I think people have seen the importance of it and the necessity for it. People will be getting benefits whether or not there's a pandemic or an epidemic, or as long as you're out of insurance at certain conditions, out of work employment, then you'll be entitled to some sort of payment. So we have an actuary coming in to do a review of the fund later this year. And I can see that the costing of an unemployment package will be one of the things that we can ask him or her to do. Thereafter, we'll have to get approval for that project and try to sell it, because we cannot impose the project on persons. But given having seen the necessity for such a project, I think it will be easier for persons to understand why we would probably go that route. Yes. So I don't think the need is for an argument. I think the need is for us to move forward to see whether or not we can now sell this and implement such a project down the line.
Okay. And talking about cost, there's been discussions about how the amount of money expended on this program, whether or not it will impact people's ability to collect their pension down the line, or whether or not their pensions will be reduced, or whether or not they have to pay it back, those who receive the money. Perhaps you can provide some clarity on that.
And no to all of those questions. The nature of the system we have is that of a defined benefit scheme. Your benefit is defined, is set in that it's X percentage of a salary or average of salaries, whether you want to call it insurable earnings, but just get rid of the jargon. Your salary is up to $5,000. Your insurable earnings is the salary on which they calculate your contributions. So we know what the benefit is going to be. But given the cost of pensions, because more and more persons are living longer and longer, so you find the cost of the program will keep rising. We're still a relatively young scheme, but the only variables we have are contribution rates, length of time you have to contribute, and various other factors. But the benefits, we're not reducing the benefits. It's a set. So that is why the actual review has to be done periodically to see how we could tweak the various conditions to ensure that the scheme is there to pay the benefits down the line. I can tell you that we have done studies which show that inevitably you recover every cent you're paid in the NIC within 2.5 years of starting to get a pension. Right? So I know some people say, well, that person died and they get nothing from the NIC. Sorry for using the but they didn't receive anything from the NIC. But that's the nature of an insurance fund. If all of us have to claim on our vehicle insurance, there'll be no vehicle insurance. So because if, for example, there's to be a massive car crash, every car crashed down, mash up.
The insurance company will go broke.
Right? So you'll find that, and again, you have your house insurance. You don't want your house to get burned. No, that is there in case of something, and that's the NIC. the NIC is there in the event of loss of income. And the inevitable loss of income is, well, when you retire. So you're no longer working, so you'll get that. But in between, you're entitled to certain benefits. You're entitled to, like I said, the various short-term benefits. And you're entitled to, if, God forbid, something happens to you in an accident, and you break your back and you can't work again, you start getting benefits from the NIC from then. But if everybody had to claim, there's no way. And just to show you, I mean, you pay, let's say, 5% of your salary in contributions. So in 1 year, you pay, say, 60% of your salary, assuming your salary has not changed, 5 by 12 is 60. So in 1 year, you pay 60% of your salary. When you start getting a pension, after contributing for a number of years, it's likely that you might be getting 60% of your salary in 1 month.
Yeah.
So if you just do the mathematics, you'll realize the benefit of the NIC. And I guess I can't say any more on that.
And also, when you look at it, the only form of income the majority of people have after they've retired is the benefits from their retirement pensions from the NIC. So it's important, and I think, and I can say, prior to me starting work here at the NIC, I really didn't pay much attention to it. And I think that's the case now. I think COVID has brought some attention to the program. I think more and more people will now be paying attention to it and to understand what the benefits are.
In fact, one of the things I didn't say was that you mentioned whether or not people's pension will be reduced. I know I said no. But I can tell you that the actual review, I think, as of 2000, had the life of the fund depleting in 2040. Now, again, when the actuaries write those things, it's based on the assumptions they made within that actual review. So they might have there that you'll increase pensions every year by X amount. Now sometimes we increase pensions every 3 years. Okay? Because so far we've recognized that the pensions we pay are still generous based on the contributions we receive. Like I tell you, in 2.5 years you've recovered every cent you paid in the NIC. Okay? So, and like as a 2000 actual review, yeah, it was 2040. Now, based on the last actual review, the reserves are expected to be depleted by 2050. But again, that's based on the assumptions within that. In there's an assumption that we'll be increasing pensions every year tied to the CPI. Without that in there, you increase the life of the fund by 10 years. So that now, what we reckon we'll be doing when this actually comes, we want him to show us both scenarios, because in as much as it's desirable to increase pensions every year, then you find you'll have to increase your contributions a lot more often than that. So as of now, the fund is very strong. We want the strongest, and my chairman eloquently presented on that. The fund is very strong. The maximum expenditure, which will reduce the life of the fund by, well, not the life of the fund, deplete the reserve based on the current assumptions, right, is significant, right? And we do not anticipate spending that amount of money in the 3 months. However, we will be looking at the expenditure in the 3 months, and if there's a need for us to go forward, like my chairman said, then we'll probably make a determination on that. But the life of the program is for 3 months. But the person's pensions are safe. There'll be no increase in no reduction in your pension as a result of that. There'll be no increase in the life, the number of years before you get a pension as a result of that. If there are other reasons, because like I tell you, the cost of the scheme would go up year by year. So far, the actuary has not recommended an increase in the life, in the retirement age. That was done a few years ago when we moved from 60 to 65 gradually. That was done quite a few years ago. But so far, there's been, in the last actual review, there was no such recommendation made.
Okay. Well, we've taken care of the NIC contributors. The Prime Minister, in his address to the nation a few weeks ago, also mentioned a program that would capture people who are not contributing to the NIC, self-employed persons and all. I know you've been working on that, Mrs. Spade. Perhaps you can, bring this into perspective for us.
Okay, the program, the income support program mentioned by the government, undertaken by the government, funded by the government, would follow a similar process as the NICs in the sense of an electronic form, because they try to maintain those controls as well in terms of the implementation. It targets persons who are self-employed, from my understanding, who is not contributing to the NIC. The NIC, persons who are self-employed are not mandated to contribute to the NIC at this time. So the government wanted to make provision for those persons who did not and to apply through the government for that benefit. The National Insurance Corporation expects that those persons on resumption of their trade, within 3 months of resuming their trade, would come into NIC to register and contribute to take advantage of the host of benefits that the director mentioned earlier that contributors can enjoy. So right now it is, something good is going to come out of that when persons come on board.
Okay. You mentioned people who are self-employed, but what benchmarks are in place to determine who is self-employed and who is not? I mean, there are people that perhaps, if I'm just sitting on the block, then I may consider myself self-employed. How is it going to be managed?
Yes, so every application that comes into the government, they do have their own checks and balances. So the applications are going to come in to the government departments, and they would cross-check against their internal databases. So persons are expected to have some sort of registration with one of the bodies. There are systems in place to ensure that. So
perhaps through the associations, the vendors association,
right,
taxi association, whatever, those sort of associations.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So they would be expected to have some sort of official registration in order to be able to validate that persons are indeed self-employed.
Okay. I think we are at about 30 minutes already. Perhaps we could wrap up. I'll give you final words and then we move to the director.
Okay. From a controls perspective, which is where I sit anyway, persons can be assured that the process that went on in preparation for the rollout of this program was basically to ensure that payment can be made to them as quickly as possible. Everything was automated as much as possible to ensure the smooth flowing. So once applications are coming in, there's a need to impress upon the need for the accuracy of the information that is submitted to us, because that is the only thing that is out of our hands in terms of the processing, to ensure that there's consistency of the information against the database. Inconsistencies can slow down the process.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Speed. Mr. Maffrey, final words from you?
Well, I just want to let the listeners and the viewers know that we're proud to be able to be of assistance in a time like this. We recognize that the National Insurance Corporation really is the only source right now that would have been able to do something like this. The entire world is in a crisis, and to source that sort of funding anywhere would have been an impossibility. And given the immediacy of the need, we'd had to act. I must say that this falls within the NIC's mandate, in that this is one of the things Social Security are required to do and have been doing throughout the world in times like this. In fact, I read something to you from the World Bank, a World Bank report on social protection measures. It is something that we ensured that the legislation was able to authorize through making the necessary amendments. And it is something we ensured that the NIC had the necessary capacity to do without compromising the fund, and ensure that our raison d'etre initially was, which is to security of persons' pensions, that this was not compromised. So persons can be rest assured that this short-term measures we've taken will benefit you. It benefits the NIC in the sense that we are satisfying part of our mandate, though it had not been costed, but it is well within the parameters of what we can afford. And given the nature of the fund, the NIC is going to rebound from that very easily, because the anticipated expenditure is not likely to require any increase in contributions of not more than maybe 20 basis points, and at the most 25 basis points per person, which would result in about $2.50 on a salary of $1,000 if we were to increase contributions as a result of this. And that's only if we go to the maximum of over $150 million. So that being said, I think it's a good program, and I hope that Solution Public sees it for what it is, as an assistance to our contributors and an assistance in a time when everyone is in need of that assistance.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Maffrey. And I must say we have a pretty awesome team working on this program. The guys in the IT department had to, develop programs from the ground up to enable us to facilitate this program, to start accepting the applications and to do all the background checks and to ensure that the controls, the strict controls put in place by Mrs. Payne were adhered to. And I think we must really thank the guys and the team that worked on this.
I wanted to do this, Mr. McCoy, but I just wanted to let everybody know we have a magnificent team of persons. And Suan, Mrs. Payne is one of the key persons in there. She's not just internal auditor, but it's also somebody I would call whatever time of the night, had a baby in the background crying, and they'll still be able to assist the senior legal counsel, our operations manager. We have a core group of persons, even Mr. McLean himself. I prevent him from sleeping 2 o'clock in the morning and we're on the phone trying to get communication. So I have a magnificent team of persons, core group, and I want to really thank them. We're not out of the woods yet. There may be teething problems, but I think I have a team of persons who will ensure that we get to our objectives. So I want to thank everybody. And I want to thank the public for your patience.
Okay. Well, there you have it. You heard from Mrs. Swan Shalry Payne, Head of Group Internal Audit, the Director, Mr. Matthew L. Mathur, and myself, McNaughton McLean. Thank you for watching.